All right, but let's highlight a little bit deeper into Invest 94L. It's already been causing some issues for spots in the Lesser Antilles. Now we're looking at the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. We can expect to see some impacts for you guys today. And then as we head a little bit later on tonight for Puerto Rico, it's going to be a concern. Now, where we could see development of 94L is a little bit closer to the Bahamas. So we're talking within another 3 days type of a window here, which is why we're in this next 7 days up to 80%, with the next 2 days just at 30%. So again, that's highlighting. It's going to take a little bit of time, still dealing with some hostile wind shear. When we think about Gabrielle, it's kind of jostled up the environment, and so it has to kind of combat some of those conditions. You can see on enhanced satellite, while we've got a little bit of organization trying to get itself together. Now, granted, if you look at 94L, it's the less impressive out of the two, 94 and 93, but it does have a better environment it will work itself into. So rain is certainly going to be the story, gusty winds, and then we'll be able to get even further updates and information on this storm from the hurricane hunters who are taking off. They've been sending great photos, videos in from Gabrielle, which we've been showing across our network ever since the weekend. This particular mission is low-level investigation, so it'll be dropping dropsondes to gather all different types of data.
Looking for a closed low.
Exactly. That is what we look for, especially if we're going to be determining something as a tropical storm.
There's a look at the scattered showers. I mean, yesterday we had many of the islands that picked up on more than 5 inches of rain. The schools in Dominica yesterday were closed because of the weather associated with this invest. So it goes without saying, you don't have to have a name to have an impact, and we'll continue to watch. Meanwhile, let's move on to Invest 93L.
Yeah, 93L is going to be an interesting storm that is getting a little bit closer. And so when we talk about that Fujiwara effect, it could potentially kind of loop these two together, do a little dancing as things kind of get close to the United States coast. So there's a lot of uncertainty within this forecast. When you don't have a closed low yet, there's not a named storm going on. And so the models are just trying to pinpoint anything that they can to try and gather things. But for Puerto Rico, impacts will be felt today. Heavy rain, topography also going to be one piece of that puzzle too. So flash flooding is going to be a concern.
Yeah, and you know what? The hurricane hunters are going to be vital on this because, to your point, there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered. And if we can get a closed low out of either one of these invests, it will help the computer models, especially with raw data from the hurricane hunters. Those pieces coming together would be crucial in figuring out the puzzle pieces that we're working with. So here's the latest on Invest 93L. Winds are at 35, 90% chances over the next 7 days, 80% for the next 2. So again, a lot of confidence that we're going to get something out of this. And looking at satellite, you know, it's interesting because each one of these invests are battling different things. You know, the invest that you were just talking about, Haley, certainly dealing with wind shear. This invest is dealing more with an issue with dry air. And for being so closely located to one another, so wild that we have some differences in the setup. So there's a look at the dusty air that's surrounding this invest. Again, tropical systems are made of thunderstorms. They like moisture. They like to have very calm winds to allow these thunderstorms to grow vertically. So with those two things being looked at, I think the dusty air is probably one of the larger contributing factors, but you can tell as we move forward in time, there is some hostile winds, some stronger winds that this invest would have to go through, but you also have a pocket of more calm air. So I would call it marginal. You know, I think it's manageable. It could actually deal with the wind shear that's in place, but the dusty air will be sort of the big thing that it has to fight through. There's a look at the computer model. So again, really good consensus of that term, but it's interesting because the consensus model drops off. Meaning that the consensus is saying maybe this won't happen.
Exactly. And you know, I think that just is another layer of uncertainty that we have with this forecast. And it's interesting to see kind of how everything will evolve. Now, in regards to 93L, this is the more likely storm to develop and take the name Umberto, which is the H named storm of the year. It is going to be a little bit of a battle to the finish to see who will and who won't. But the good news is that this storm, if it does develop, and we don't see a lot of interaction with 94L, it'll have that recurve effect in between the U.S. and Bermuda. At least that's where the latest trends are. Not quite far enough out to have that yellow consensus line prove that point, but at least that's what things have been pointing to over the last couple of days.
Water temperatures are warm for both invests. So that is something that is true for both spots. That's not going to be changing. We got the heat content there to produce tropical systems. The question is, can it deal with the shear and the dry air to actually turn into something?